My name is Seraphina Crowe. Before everything fell apart, my life was painfully ordinary. I used to believe ordinary was safe. I used to think nothing truly terrible could happen if you followed rules, trusted people, and stayed quiet. That belief died slowly, the way light disappears at dusk, not suddenly, but inevitably. I grew up in a house filled with controlled silence. My father was respected in rooms I was never allowed to enter, and my mother was the kind of woman who smiled even when her eyes carried storms she never spoke about. I learned early that questions were unwelcome and curiosity was dangerous. Still, I watched, I listened, I remembered. The night my childhood ended didn't announce itself with violence. It arrived politely, dressed in calm voices and reassuring lies. I remember the warmth of the living room lamp, the ticking clock, the sound of my father's pen scratching paper. He asked me to sign documents I didn't understand. He said it was for my future. He said it was protection. I trusted him. That was my first mistake. 2 weeks later, I was driven out of the city before sunrise. No goodbyes, no explanations, just a black car, tinted windows, and a man who never said my name. I pressed my forehead against the glass and watched the streets disappear, unaware that I was watching my freedom die. The place they took me to didn't exist on any map. It was hidden behind legality, masked as an educational foundation. Inside, it felt like a laboratory built to study obedience. They stripped me of my clothes, my identity, my voice. I became a subject, a number, a file, days lost meaning. I was tested, evaluated, corrected. Not beaten, but broken carefully, systematically. They rewarded silence. They punished resistance with isolation. I learned quickly that survival meant compliance, and compliance meant forgetting who I was, but I never forgot. I learned how power spoke without raising its voice. I learned how fear wore the mask of kindness. I learned how betrayal could look like care. And slowly, quietly, I began to understand why I was there. I wasn't chosen randomly. I was inherited. My mother had been one of them once, not fully inside, but close enough to know too much. She left before they could cage her, and for that, they took what mattered most to her, me. Years passed. I grew up inside walls designed to erase people, yet something in me refused to disappear. I watched patterns. I memorized routines. I learned who doubted, who obeyed, who feared. I learned patience, and patience became my weapon. The day I escaped wasn't dramatic. No alarms, no chase, just a door left unlocked by someone who believed in me more than they believed in the system. I walked out into rain, my heart pounding, my lungs burning, my mind terrifyingly clear. Freedom tasted cold. I disappeared that night, changed names, changed cities, learned how to survive in a world that had never been kind to me. I educated myself in shadows, finance, psychology, human behavior. I learned how to read people the way they had once read me, and then I went home. My parents' house looked exactly the same, fresh paint. New curtains, a perfect illusion of peace. I stood across the street and watched them through a window, laughing, alive, untouched. They had traded me for safety. That was the moment revenge stopped being an emotion and became a decision. I didn't hate them. I planned them. I didn't rush my revenge. People think revenge is fueled by anger, but anger is loud and impatient. I had learned patience the hard way. Patience is quieter. It watches. It waits, it sharpens. After returning to the city, I didn't step into my parents' lives immediately. I lived nearby, close enough to feel their presence without being seen. I rented a small apartment above a closed bookstore, the kind of place no one ever looked twice at. From my window, I could see the corner cafe my mother visited every Thursday morning, the park my father crossed every evening like clockwork. They had routines. Routines are weaknesses disguised as comfort. I watched them relearn happiness without me. New friends, new conversations, new laughter. It amazed me how easily people adapt when guilt is buried under time. I didn't interrupt their peace, not yet. Peace makes people careless. I took a job under a different name, one that allowed me access to people who talked too much when they felt important. I learned who my father met behind closed doors, which hands he shook, which favors he still owed. He wasn't powerful on his own. He had always been useful. Useful people are protected until they aren't. My mother was harder to read. She had aged differently, softer maybe, or more hollow. Sometimes I wondered if she regretted it. Other times I saw relief in her eyes, and that hurt more than anger ever could. I began with small disturbances, anonymous tips, subtle questions asked in the wrong places, records that surfaced unexpectedly. Nothing illegal, nothing obvious, just enough to make them uneasy. The first crack appeared when my father was audited. I watched him pace the living room through the window, phone pressed tightly to his ear, voice low and tense. He had always been calm, controlled. Seeing him unravel felt surreal. That night, I dreamed of the facility again. White walls, locked doors, my number printed on a bracelet. I woke up shaking, my body remembering pain my mind had learned to suppress. I reminded myself why I was doing this. I wasn't punishing them for betraying me. I was dismantling the system that taught them betrayal was acceptable. The organization still existed. It had evolved, changed its name, hidden behind newer, cleaner faces. But the structure remained, and my parents were still tied to it, quietly benefiting from the protection they had bought with my life. I made contact with someone who used to work inside, a man who drank too much and carried guilt like a second spine. He didn't recognize me. He recognized my questions. "You don't want to dig there," he warned me. "I already have," I replied. He told me things I already suspected, how children like me were seen as assets, how loyalty was tested through sacrifice, how families were rewarded for cooperation. "You survived," he said quietly. "Most don't. Then I owe them an ending," I answered. As weeks passed, pressure closed in around my parents. Invitations stopped coming, calls went unanswered, old allies distanced themselves. The protection they had traded me for was being slowly withdrawn. They were becoming expendable. One evening, my mother sat alone at the cafe, stirring cold coffee long after it had lost its warmth. I sat 2 tables away, hidden in plain sight. I watched her hands tremble slightly. I wondered if she felt me near her, the way people sometimes feel a storm before it arrives. When she left, she dropped something on the floor. I picked it up, a photograph, me, at 16. My chest tightened. She hadn't erased me completely. That realization complicated things. Revenge is cleaner when the people you're destroying feel nothing human. I hated that a part of me still searched her face for something resembling love. I didn't confront her. Instead, I accelerated everything. I leaked information that connected my father directly to illegal transfers. I guided investigators exactly where they needed to look. I didn't fabricate anything. I didn't need to. The truth had always been enough. The arrest happened early in the morning. I watched from across the street as officers led him out in handcuffs. My mother stood frozen in the doorway, her face pale, her world collapsing in real time. I felt no joy, only a quiet sense of inevitability. That night, my phone rang from a number I hadn't seen in years. "I know it's you," my mother said, her voice cracked in a way I had never heard before. "I don't know what you want," she continued, "but please, we did what we thought we had to." I closed my eyes. "You did what was easiest," I replied. Silence stretched between us, heavy with everything we had never said. "They would have killed you," she whispered. "They tried," I answered, "and you let them." She began to cry. Real sobs, uncontrolled. It didn't heal me. It didn't undo anything. But it confirmed something I needed to know. She understood now. Understanding comes too late for forgiveness. I ended the call and threw the phone into the river. The final phase had begun. The organization noticed me after that. Subtle warnings, legal threats, people watching from cars that lingered too long. I welcomed it. Visibility meant impact. I wanted them to know I was no longer hiding. I wanted them to understand that what they created had learned how to fight back. I wasn't the frightened girl they locked away. I was the consequence they never planned for, and soon they would face me. I knew the final confrontation wouldn't be loud. Endings rarely are. They arrive quietly, disguised as ordinary moments, waiting for you to step into them without realizing there's no way back. After my father's arrest, the city shifted around me. Conversations lowered their volume when I entered rooms. Doors that once opened easily now hesitated. Fear had a way of spreading faster than truth, and the organization felt it. They always did. When systems built on silence begin to crack, those at the top feel the tremor first. I didn't hide anymore. I didn't need to. The organization reached out through intermediaries, lawyers who smiled too much, consultants who spoke in rehearsed phrases. They offered settlements, immunity, protection. They used the same language they had once used on my parents: security, stability, future. I ignored them all. You can't negotiate with something you intend to dismantle. My mother tried to see me. She left messages that grew shorter and more desperate as days passed. I didn't answer, not because I hated her, but because some conversations can only end one way, and I needed to be ready for that ending. The invitation came on a gray afternoon. A single envelope slid under my door. No return address, thick paper, heavy ink. Inside was an address, a time, and a sentence written in a careful, confident hand. Let us finish this. I arrived early. The building stood alone at the edge of the city. Old stone and glass repurposed into something sterile and imposing. I recognized the architecture immediately. It was one of theirs, neutral, forgettable, designed to erase footprints. I walked inside without resistance. They wanted me there. A woman waited for me in a room that smelled faintly of polished wood and cold air. She was older than I expected, silver threaded through her hair, her posture straight and unyielding. She didn't offer her name. She didn't need to. "You've caused significant disruption," she said calmly. "You caused my childhood," I replied. Her eyes flickered, but her voice remained steady. We maintained balance. "You maintained control." She gestured for me to sit. I didn't. "You survived because you were resilient," she continued. "Not because we failed." I laughed softly. "You failed the moment you believed ownership was the same as power." She studied me, really studied me, as if measuring something invisible. "You want justice. I want truth," I said. "And consequences. Those rarely coexist. They do today." I placed a folder on the table between us. Inside were copies of everything: names, transactions, directives, evidence layered upon evidence. Not just against the organization, but against the people who had propped it up for decades. Her hand hovered over the folder. She didn't open it. "You've already sent this elsewhere," she said. "Yes." "Then why are you here?" I took a breath. "The kind you take before stepping into deep water, because there's one thing documents can't do," I said. "They can't look you in the eye." Silence settled between us, heavy and deliberate. "You were trained," she said finally. "Conditioned. You could have been extraordinary." "I am," I replied, "just not for you." She stood slowly. "If this goes public completely, institutions will fall. Innocent people will be hurt." "Innocent people were hurt long before I arrived," I said. "You just didn't count them." Her composure finally cracked. "Just a fracture, but enough. You think ending us will heal you. No," I said honestly, "but it will stop you from doing this to anyone else." The door opened behind me. My mother stepped into the room. Time folded in on itself. I felt 16 again, standing in a place where my voice didn't matter. She looked smaller than I remembered, older, worn down by a guilt that had finally run out of places to hide. "Seraphina," she whispered. I didn't move. She insisted. "The woman said you deserved to hear it from her." My mother's hands trembled. I thought they would keep you safe. They promised you comfort." I interrupted. "They promised you distance from consequences." She shook her head, tears spilling freely now. "I was afraid." "I know," I said quietly, "but you were afraid of losing your life." "I lost mine anyway." The woman watched us like an observer at a controlled experiment. "I'm not here for forgiveness," my mother said. "I just needed you to know. Every day I paid for it." I looked at her for a long time. At the familiar lines of her face, the echoes of myself I still carried. I didn't come back for apologies. I said, I came back for endings. I turned to the woman. This is where it stops. She exhaled slowly, the weight of years pressing down on her shoulders. Then you leave us no choice. I smiled, calm and clear. You never had one. I walked out of the building without looking back. Within hours, the final release went live. Every file, every name, every secret stripped of its protection. News outlets erupted. Investigations launched. Allies abandoned ship. The organization collapsed under the weight of its own history. Arrests followed, trials, public outrage, quiet suicides that were never officially linked to anything. My mother testified, I didn't need to. Months passed. The city learned to breathe again, slowly, cautiously. I watched from a distance as statues fell and institutions rebranded, pretending they had never known what they had funded. I left shortly after, no ceremony, no announcement, just a train ticket and a bag light enough to carry without pain. On my last night, I stood on a bridge overlooking the river and let the wind move through me. I thought about the girl I had been, the woman I had become, the cost of survival, the price of truth. I wasn't healed, but I was whole. Revenge didn't give me peace, choice did. My name is Seraphina Crowe. I was taken, I was erased, I returned, and this time I chose myself.